The night the stars fell, Elias Carter was only 9 years old. The frontier colony of Grey Ridge was quiet after sunset. Most people slept early because the next day always meant work in the fields, the mines, or the repair yards. The sky above the settlement was wide and clear, filled with familiar stars that never seemed to move. Elias often lay on the roof of his family's small house and watched them, imagining stories his teachers said were impossible. Humans were alone, they claimed. Space was empty and cold. That night proved them wrong. A sudden flash split the sky open. Light brighter than any sunrise streaked across the stars, burning red and white as it screamed through the air. A deep thunder followed, shaking windows and setting off alarms across the colony. People shouted, lights turned on, sirens wailed from the security tower. Elias sat up fast, his heart pounding. He watched the fireball crash beyond the hills, far from the settlement, where the old forests began. A second boom rolled across the ground, softer but heavier, like something very large had hit the world. His parents rushed into his room and told him to stay inside. They said it was probably a meteor, and the authorities would handle it. Elias nodded, but his mind was already far away, following the smoke rising into the sky. When the house finally went quiet again, Elias slipped on his boots. He wrapped his jacket tight and eased the door open, careful not to make a sound. The night air smelled like metal and burning leaves. The smoke trail was still visible, glowing faintly as it drifted over the hills. He told himself he would only look, just for a minute. The path into the forest was dark and uneven, but Elias knew it well. He had explored these woods since he could walk. As he climbed higher, the smell grew stronger, sharp and strange, nothing like firewood or machines. Then he saw the light. Ahead, the trees were broken and scorched in a wide circle. At the center lay something that should not exist. A smooth, curved object rested in a shallow crater, its surface cracked and glowing faintly blue. Strange symbols pulsed across it like slow heartbeats. Elias froze. His fear screamed at him to run, but another sound reached his ears, quiet and weak. A cry. It was not human. The sound came from the far side of the wreck. Elias swallowed and forced his legs to move. He crept closer, each step careful. Around the curved object lay fragments of strange metal and dark glass. Sparks jumped and died in the dirt. Behind the wreck, half hidden by smoke and shadows, lay a small figure. She looked almost human at first glance. She was about his size, maybe a little taller, with pale skin that shimmered faintly in the blue light. Her clothes were torn and burned, made of a fabric Elias had never seen before. Blood, darker than human blood, stained her side. Her eyes opened when he stepped closer. They were not human. They were large and bright, glowing softly like liquid stars. When she saw him, her body tensed. She tried to crawl back, fear clear on her face. She raised one shaking hand, and a faint light flickered around her fingers, then died. Elias stood there, shaking. This was not a dream. This was not a story. This was real. I won't hurt you, he whispered, though his voice trembled. I promise. The girl stared at him, clearly not understanding his words. But something in his tone seemed to reach her. She stopped moving, though her breathing was fast and shallow. Elias slowly took off his jacket and held it out. After a long moment, she reached for it with trembling hands. He gently placed it over her shoulders. She flinched at the touch, then relaxed slightly. He noticed a deep wound along her side, where metal had cut into her skin. It was bad. Really bad. I need to help you, he said softly. She made a sound, low and broken, and her eyes filled with tears. She pointed weakly toward the sky, then back toward the wreck, then at him. Her meaning was unclear, but her fear was not. Suddenly, a distant hum reached Elias's ears. He turned his head sharply. Lights were moving through the sky. Not colony lights. These were sharp and fast, scanning the forest below. Someone was coming. Elias's heart raced. He knew the colony security would arrive soon. And somehow, deep in his bones, he knew they would not help her. He grabbed her hand. Come on, She resisted at first, pain flashing across her face. But when a beam of light swept across the trees nearby, she panicked. Using all her strength, she leaned against him. Elias wrapped her arm around his shoulders and struggled to lift her. She was lighter than he expected, but every step was hard. They moved away from the wreck, deeper into the forest, just as voices echoed behind them. Machines whirred. Metal boots crushed leaves. They hid in a narrow ravine Elias knew well. He pulled her into a shallow cave formed by fallen rocks and thick roots. From there, they watched as tall figures emerged into the clearing. They were not human. They were tall and sharp, wearing dark armor that reflected the wreck's blue light. Their movements were fast and precise. One of them knelt by the crashed object, touching its surface. Another scanned the area with a glowing device. The girl beside Elias trembled violently. She covered her mouth to stop herself from crying out. Elias held her hand tighter. After long minutes, the figures spoke in harsh, clicking sounds. One of them gestured angrily. Their scanning lights passed close to the ravine, then moved on. Eventually, they returned to the sky, lifting off in streaks of light. The forest went quiet again. Elias waited a long time before moving. When he finally looked at the girl, she was barely conscious. Her skin felt cold. He knew he could not bring her home. He knew he could not leave her here. He remembered an old storage bunker near the river, long abandoned. No one went there anymore. With effort and stubborn determination, he helped her walk, stopping often to rest. By the time they reached the bunker, the sky was beginning to lighten. Inside, he cleaned her wound with water from his bottle. He tore strips from his shirt to wrap it. He worked carefully, copying what he had seen his mother do. The girl watched him the entire time. When he finished, she reached out and touched his face gently. Her fingers were warm now. She spoke softly, her voice musical and strange. He did not understand a word, but he understood the feeling. Gratitude. Relief. Something deeper. She closed her eyes, exhausted. Hours later, she woke suddenly, alert and tense. She moved toward the entrance, listening. Then she turned back to Elias. She stood as straight as she could and placed her hand over her chest. She spoke again, slower this time, then pointed at him. Her eyes shone with emotion. Elias smiled weakly. "My name is Elias." She seemed to understand names. She spoke one word in response, clear and strong. "Seralith." Before he could respond, the bunker shook slightly. A faint hum filled the air, different from before. The girl looked up, relief and sadness mixing on her face. She reached into her clothing and pulled out a small object, glowing softly. She pressed it into Elias's palm. It was warm, and a symbol formed on his skin, sinking in like light beneath water. It did not hurt. She held his hands tightly, her eyes locked with his. Then, with a final look, she turned and stepped outside. A small, silent craft descended from the trees, hidden until now. She climbed inside, and it lifted smoothly into the sky, vanishing among the clouds. Elias stood alone in the bunker, staring at the mark glowing faintly on his hand. That night, the stars seemed closer than ever, and far above Grey Ridge, something ancient had taken notice of humanity for the very first time. Years passed, but the night in the forest never left Elias Carter. Grey Ridge changed slowly. New buildings rose, old paths disappeared. Elias grew from a curious boy into a quiet young man with strong hands and thoughtful eyes. He worked in the repair yards, fixing colony machines and broken transports. It was honest work. Safe work. He liked machines because they followed rules. Life did not. The mark on his palm never faded. It looked like a faint silver symbol, smooth and warm to the touch. Doctors could not explain it. Scanners showed nothing unusual. Some said it was a scar. Others joked it was a birthmark, shaped like a star. Elias stopped asking questions after a while. He learned to wear gloves when people stared too long. But at night, when he slept, He dreamed of blue light and glowing eyes. On the 20th anniversary of the crash, the sky changed again. Elias was working late when the alarms began. This time they were different. Deeper. Louder. The ground vibrated beneath his feet. Outside, people shouted and pointed upward. Elias stepped out of the repair bay and looked at the sky. It was full of ships, not one or two. Dozens. Massive shapes blocking out the stars, their surfaces shining with cold light. They hung in the air without sound, too large to be real. Panic spread through the colony. Some people ran. Others froze where they stood. A global broadcast cut through the noise. The signal did not come from Earth. It came from above. The voice was calm, clear, and carried a strange musical tone. It spoke in perfect human language. People of Earth, do not fear. We come not as conquerors, but as keepers of an ancient debt. Every screen in the colony lit up. The same message appeared across the planet. Governments scrambled. Militaries prepared weapons they knew would not matter. Elias felt his heart pound. His hand began to glow faintly. The voice continued. We seek the human known as Elias Carter of Grey Ridge. His breath caught. Around him, people turned to stare. Elias backed away slowly. His thoughts raced. This was impossible. This could not be about him. He was no one. Just a repair worker from a forgotten colony. The symbol on his palm flared brighter. Security officers arrived quickly. They questioned him, scanned him, argued among themselves. Elias told them everything. About the crash. About the girl. About the mark. Many did not believe him. Some did. Before they could decide what to do, a small craft descended outside the colony gates. It was sleek and silent, glowing softly like moonlight on water. A single figure stepped out. She walked forward without guards or weapons. The crowd fell silent. She was tall now, taller than Elias. Her presence was powerful, controlled, and calm. She wore flowing armor that looked like living metal, shaped with elegance rather than force. A crown of light hovered just above her head, shifting gently. But when her eyes met Elias's, something changed. They softened. She stopped a few steps away from him and knelt. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The alien queen bowed her head to a human. Elias Carter, she said, her voice clear and steady. You saved my life when I was weak and hunted. I am Serelith, Queen of the Aurelian Concord. I have come to honor my debt. Elias could not speak. His throat felt tight. He stared at her, seeing flashes of the frightened girl in the forest beneath the queen she had become. I was a child, he finally said. So were you, Serelith smiled faintly. And yet you chose mercy. That choice shaped worlds. She rose and turned to face the gathered humans. Her voice carried across the colony and beyond, broadcast to every corner of Earth. By the oldest law of my people, a life saved binds the savior to the saved. Not as a master, not as property, but as one whose fate is forever honored. Murmurs spread, fear mixed with confusion. Elias stepped forward. What does that mean? It means, Serelith said gently, that you are under my protection. And by extension, so is your world. That was when the protests began. Human leaders argued that no single man could speak for Earth. Alien advisors appeared beside Serelith, their expressions cold and sharp. They whispered warnings about tradition and purity. Some looked at Elias with open dislike. He is human, one said loudly. Weak, untrained, unworthy. Serelith's eyes hardened. He is the reason I live. The tension grew heavy. Above, the great ships shifted position, their presence a silent reminder of power beyond imagination. Elias felt small. He did not want this. He had never asked for attention, or honor, or destiny. He had just helped someone who was hurt. I don't want to cause a war, Elias said quietly. If me being here does that, I'll go with you. Serelith studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. You will come as my guest, she said. Not as a prisoner. You will speak for yourself before the Concord. Earth's leaders protested, but the truth was clear. They had no choice. Within hours, Elias stood aboard an alien ship. The interior felt alive, responding to movement and thought. Through the transparent walls, he watched Earth shrink into a blue and white sphere. Fear hit him then, deep and real. He was leaving everything he knew. The journey through space was smooth and unreal. Elias spent long hours speaking with Sarilith. She told him of her people, of the betrayal that had forced her escape years ago, of the civil war that followed. She told him how she survived because she remembered a human child who chose kindness without reason. You were my proof, she said. That mercy was not weakness. When they reached the capital world, Elias understood how small humanity truly was. The city stretched beyond the horizon, towers of light and energy rising into the sky. Ships of countless shapes filled the air. Species he could not name moved through the streets. Some stared at him with curiosity, others with distrust. Elias felt every eye on him. Before the full council, voices clashed. Some demanded Earth's submission. Others argued for alliance. Many questioned why a human should matter at all. Elias was given a chance to speak. He stepped forward, hands shaking, and told the truth. He spoke of fear, of choice, of how helping someone should never require a reward. He did not threaten. He did not beg. He simply stood his ground. Silence followed. Sarilith watched him, pride shining in her eyes. The council did not decide that day, but something had changed. A human had stood before the stars and refused to be small. And far from Earth, deep within the Concord, old powers began to whisper, afraid of what humanity might become if allowed to stand beside them. Elias Carter had expected the alien capital to be intimidating, but nothing prepared him for the trials that awaited. The city stretched endlessly, a blend of towering spires, floating platforms, and rivers of glowing energy. From above, it looked like a living constellation, and yet, walking its streets, Elias felt small and fragile. Creatures of every size and shape passed by, their languages weaving in a chaotic harmony. He had no idea which species could be trusted, which plotted against him, or which simply ignored him. Every corner, every shadow, seemed alive with judgment. Sarilith walked beside him, calm and assured. She was the same girl he had saved so many years ago, yet completely transformed. Her presence radiated authority, and yet her eyes softened when they met his. You must understand, she said softly, her voice carrying over the alien sounds of the city. The Concord respects strength, wisdom, and honor. You possess none in their terms, but they will watch you carefully. How you respond to trials will determine their opinion and mine. Elias nodded, unsure if he could measure up. All his life, he had measured strength by survival, by kindness, by simple choices between fear and courage. Could that matter here? The first trial began almost immediately. In a vast chamber shaped like a dome, lights shimmered along the walls. Elias and other candidates, representatives from various species, stood in a circle. A figure stepped forward. Tall, armored, with eyes like molten silver. He spoke in a tone that echoed in the chamber. You will face challenges of thought, ethics, and character, the figure said. Those who fail may return to their worlds, or remain here forever, forgotten. Elias swallowed hard. The first challenge was simple in appearance. A device on the floor, with a transparent container holding a tiny creature, barely alive. A voice spoke in the chamber, clear and neutral. You must save it, but you may only use one method. Choose wisely. Others will observe your choice. Candidates rushed forward, some using brute force, some using clever machines, others attempting complicated sequences of energy manipulation. All failed. The tiny creature did not survive. Elias stepped forward slowly. He knelt and observed the container, studying the creature's movements and breathing. He noticed subtle reactions to light, subtle cues to touch. Using only his hands and the limited tools around him, he gently adjusted the container, coaxing the creature towards safety. He used patience, care, and attention, rather than strength or speed. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The chamber remained silent. Finally, the creature stirred, moving on its own, unharmed. Lights in the dome shifted, signaling approval. Elias realized, with a rush of relief, that his way, gentleness, observation, attention, had succeeded where force had failed. Saralith's eyes met his from the back of the room, and for a moment, he saw pride, relief, and something deeper. Recognition that his humanity, his choices, truly mattered. The next trials were more complex. He faced tests of communication, where he had to resolve disputes between rival species, each with their own customs and histories. Words were not enough. Body language, timing, and trust mattered. Elias stumbled, frustrated, nearly giving in to fear. Yet, he remembered the forest years ago, the small decisions that had mattered then, and he applied the same principle. Observe, listen, act with honesty. Through hours of trial, he slowly earned respect. Not the loud kind of respect, but the quiet, careful acknowledgement of those who had doubted him. Some whispered among themselves, noting that the human might not be weak, as expected. It was during the political trial that Elias faced his hardest challenge. A faction of alien nobles opposed Saralith and saw him as a weak link. They presented evidence, some fabricated, claiming that Earth could not be trusted, that humans were dangerous in ways they could not understand. Elias was asked to speak in their council chamber, a room vast enough to hold hundreds, floating platforms circling overhead. He could see the doubt in the council's eyes, the disbelief at his presence, and the underlying tension, the fear of what a human might represent. He took a deep breath and spoke. I am not strong by your measures. I am not clever in the ways your laws demand, but I know what it means to act when no one is watching, to choose kindness when it is easier to ignore, to protect life when it brings no reward. That is what humans can do. That is what I have done. That is why I am here. And that is why Saralith trusts me. The chamber was silent. Whispers spread among the council. The human had spoken plainly, without fear, without deception. It was unexpected. Some members tried to argue, pointing out inconsistencies or flaws. Elias responded calmly, never raising his voice, never showing anger. He explained the decisions he had made in his life and in the trials, showing that his actions were consistent with principle, not luck. By the end, several factions had shifted, their eyes betraying curiosity and respect. Elias realized that, for the first time, he was being seen not as a weak human, but as someone who mattered. Yet the trials were not over. That evening, Saralith brought him to a chamber deep within the capital, a place forbidden to most. It was the archives of her people, holding knowledge of wars, betrayals, and ancient laws. You must understand this, she said, her tone serious. Not all accept humans. Some will plot against you. Others will see opportunity in your inexperience. You must be ready. Inside the archives, Elias saw records of the very event that had brought them together. The crash on Grey Ridge. The council members who had opposed him had already plotted ways to manipulate Saralith, to use him as leverage against Earth. You are more than a symbol, she said. You are a bridge. Your choices now will protect not just me, but countless lives. Elias felt a weight settle on his shoulders heavier than any machine he had ever repaired. He had thought saving a single child in the forest was difficult. Now he had to navigate an empire, prevent betrayal, and prove that humanity deserved respect in a galaxy that had never cared about them. Weeks passed. Elias learned the customs of the Concord, its laws, its rituals. He trained, not with weapons, but with ideas, strategy, and diplomacy. Saralith guided him, teaching patience, timing, and understanding. Together, they uncovered a plot by rival nobles to overthrow her and seize control. A conspiracy that threatened both her throne and Earth. The night they discovered the final piece of the plot, Elias understood the magnitude of what was at stake. Alien ships were moving into positions near Earth, poised for attack. Coordinators from the plotters were preparing to act, expecting Seralith to be distracted. Elias did not panic. He remembered the forest, the small choices, the patience and courage that had once mattered. Using the knowledge he had gained, he devised a plan to reveal the conspiracy before it could act. He spoke before the council, presenting the evidence clearly, logically, and without accusation. The conspirators attempted to interrupt, but Elias anticipated their moves, countering calmly, showing their intentions to everyone present. For hours, the council debated. Then, finally, the truth could no longer be denied. The plot collapsed, the conspirators exposed. Seralith's rule was secure. The council members who had doubted Elias looked at him differently now. He was no longer merely a human. He was a force, not of weapons or domination, but of integrity, courage, and principle. Seralith approached him after the council adjourned. Her eyes shone with pride and relief. "You did not fight with strength," she said softly. "You did not fight with fear. You fought with the human way." And it was enough. Elias felt exhaustion, but also a strange joy. He had survived trials that would have broken others. He had protected both a queen and his home. He had done so without violence, without deception, only through the qualities that had defined him all his life. And in that moment, he understood something profound. Humanity's greatest strength was not machines, armies, or technology. It was choice, the choice to act with courage, compassion, and integrity when all odds were against you. Seralith placed her hand on his shoulder. "You have changed the Concord," she said. "Because of you, we see that humanity is worth more than we imagined." Elias looked out over the alien city, lights shimmering like stars, and knew the trials were only beginning. But he was ready. For the first time in his life, he truly believed that one human, with a single act of kindness, could change the course of worlds, and that belief would carry him through whatever came next. Elias Carter stood at the edge of the grand balcony, looking out over the alien capital. The towers shimmered under 3 moons, lights flowing like rivers of stars. He could hear Seralith's footsteps behind him, quiet but deliberate. She did not need to speak for him to know she was there. And he was grateful for the presence of someone who had once been a frightened child and was now the ruler of an empire. "Do you ever think about Earth?" Elias asked, his voice low. Seralith turned, her eyes reflecting the city's glow. "Every day. I do not forget where I came from or who saved me." Elias looked down at his hand. The mark still glowed faintly, a reminder that a single choice, made in fear and hope, had shaped the future of 2 worlds. He could not have imagined this as a child, hiding in the forest, helping a wounded girl who spoke in a language he did not understand. The Concord had changed because of him. The Alien Council, once filled with doubt and suspicion, had seen the value of human choices. They had watched him act in trials, solve disputes, and reveal betrayal. They had discovered that strength did not always mean power, and that patience and honor could shift the tide of history. But even now, the threat of unrest lingered. Certain factions of the Concord, humiliated by their failure to overthrow Seralith, still whispered of rebellion. Elias knew the galaxy was vast, and distrust ran deep. Yet he was not afraid. He had learned to act calmly, to think clearly, and to trust in what he knew to be true. That humanity's way was not weakness. A sudden alarm sounded across the capital. Lights flashed red and orange, and the air hummed with energy. Elias instinctively reached for Seralith's hand. She nodded, calm but alert. They moved quickly through the corridors. Following the source of the alarm, in the central chamber, they found a group of alien technicians frantically attempting to reroute power from a damaged starship. The vessel had been sabotaged, likely a final attempt by the remaining conspirators. If it failed, the damage could trigger a catastrophic explosion, destroying part of the city. Elias assessed the situation. He had watched the machines for weeks, learned their patterns and quirks. He moved forward, directing the technicians. Reverse the flux. Focus on stabilizing the core first. His voice carried authority. Not because of rank, but because he knew what to do. The technicians hesitated, unsure of a human's ability to command in such a moment. Seralith's presence reassured them, and they followed Elias's instructions. Sweat ran down his face as he worked alongside them, heart pounding with each calculation, each adjustment. Slowly, the ship stabilized. The red alarms faded, replaced by the soft hum of normal operation. Seralith placed a hand on his shoulder. You see, your understanding of what is simple and logical saves more than you imagine. Elias allowed himself a small smile. He realized that heroism did not always come from grand gestures. Sometimes it came from remaining steady when chaos threatened to overwhelm everyone else. Word of Elias's actions spread quickly across the Concorde. The council, previously skeptical, now praised his insight and courage. Earth's leaders, watching from their own orbiting stations, breathed a collective sigh of relief. They began to understand that Elias represented something new, a bridge between species, a symbol that humanity could be trusted not with power alone, but with judgment and integrity. Over the following weeks, Elias worked closely with Seralith to establish a formal alliance between Earth and the Concorde. Trade agreements were signed, knowledge was shared, and defensive pacts were put into place. But more importantly, humans began to gain recognition as beings capable of thought, compassion, and honor on a galactic scale. During one quiet evening, Seralith led Elias to the central plaza of the capital. Alien citizens moved about. Some curious, some respectful, many hesitant but watchful. She gestured to the scene. Look at them, she said softly. They are beginning to understand. They see what you have taught them, Elias. Humans are not just survivors. Humans are capable of greatness. Elias watched the crowds, feeling a strange pride. Not because he was honored, but because the choices he had made. The simple decision to act with kindness, all those years ago, had sparked change. He remembered the frightened child, the small forest clearing, and the wounded girl. If he had turned away, if he had been selfish or afraid, none of this would have been possible. He turned to Seralith. Do you think this will last? She smiled faintly. It must. And it will. Not because of force, not because of fear, but because of understanding. You have shown them that choices matter. For the first time, Elias felt the weight of destiny not as a burden, but as a responsibility he could bear. Humanity had been small and unremarkable to the galaxy, and yet, in a few simple acts, it had proven its worth. As days turned into weeks, Elias continued to navigate the complex web of politics, culture, and law within the Concorde. He mediated disputes, advised on trade, and even taught lessons to young diplomats about the value of empathy and careful thought. Each action reinforced the same truth: that humans, though physically weaker than many species, could wield choices as powerfully as any weapon. One evening, Seralith invited Elias to stand beside her on the grand observation balcony overlooking Earth. The planet glowed with oceans and continents, clouds drifting lazily across its surface. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel small in a good way, not overwhelmed, but aware of the immense scale of the universe and the possibilities within it. You have changed more than this city, Seralith said softly, her voice blending with the hum of the night. You have changed the way my people see the universe. Because of you, they see that strength alone is not enough. They see that life, choice, and integrity matter. Elias nodded, staring down at Earth, thinking of his family, his friends, and the colony where it all began. He felt a deep sense of connection to both worlds now. His life had moved far from what he imagined as a child, yet the simple act of kindness had carried him across the stars. The final ceremony came quietly. The Council of the Concorde gathered to formalize the Human-Concorde Alliance. Seralith stood before them, With Elias at her side, she spoke of honor, of debts repaid, and of the small choices that could shape the galaxy. When she mentioned Elias by name, the room was silent, every being attentive. Elias did not feel pride. He felt gratitude for the chance to act, for the opportunity to be part of something greater than himself, and for the knowledge that humanity's way could endure even among the stars. When the ceremony concluded, Sarilith turned to him. "The galaxy is vast," she said. "There will always be challenges. But now, humanity has a place, a voice, a choice." Elias placed his hand lightly on hers, feeling the warmth and strength of the bond that had begun in a forest long ago. "And we will honor it," he said quietly. As they looked out over the stars, Elias understood something deeply simple and true. The universe did not need humans to conquer it. It only needed them to act with courage, kindness, and integrity. In a galaxy full of power and ambition, humanity's quiet triumph lay in the choices they made, and in the understanding that even small acts of compassion could shape the course of worlds. The ships of the Concord glimmered above, Earth shining like a jewel beneath them, and Elias felt a deep sense of peace. Humanity had earned its place not through might, but through the very qualities that made them human. And in that moment, the stars seemed closer, not distant, but welcoming. The child who had once hidden in a forest, helping a frightened alien girl, now stood as a symbol of humanity's potential. The galaxy had watched, and for the first time, it had learned that the human way, simple, brave, compassionate, could be the strongest force of all. And Elias knew, as he gazed at the stars with Sarilith beside him, that this was only the beginning. Humanity's story among the stars had truly begun, and nothing would ever be the same again.